Right on. Thanks for sharing, Julio. And good questions. Definitely keep coming up with those questions and throwing them out there. At the end of the day, the goal is for all of you to feel comfortable with everything that you're learning here. And I don't know, maybe it's natural, right? I think if I had to really think back to when I was going through Platoon myself, it's natural to be uncertain and to just not know. You're in the dark, right? Like you can't know what you don't know. So the best way to get past that is just ask questions and hack away. We are, we were talking about Ansible. We were talking about how you could pass in multiple commands to the Ansible command, or I should say multiple arguments to the Ansible command. So that's things like inventory files, which I believe you all covered yesterday. Um, Playbooks, which we're going to cover today. And let me actually just go ahead and share my screen. And again, in addition to those things, you can pass in limits, additional environment variables, Booleans for different options, like being able to see the diff between the previous state and the updated state of your target nodes. And that's probably what makes it the most intimidating at first. But once you're kind of past that hurdle, I feel it's similar to getting over the difficulty curve of Terraform, right? At first, Terraform can seem very overwhelming because there's, I don't know, maybe it's just so different from how we teach you all to like write code in JavaScript or Python, or how we've been teaching you to provision resources in AWS. But really, if you break it down, Terraform consists of two components, right? And that's writing your configurations and then running those configurations. Of course, there's more nuance than that, but just having the foundational knowledge of knowing how to start a project, spin it up, uh, tear it down, that's already like such a big chunk of the learning curve. And really, just over time, you will feel more and more comfortable with it. Ansible, I guess you could argue that it's just as simple that half of it is writing configs and half is execution. But it really is a little more complicated than that, right? Because you're writing different kinds of configs. Whereas Terraform has the one file that you're concerned with, and that's your Terraform file. Ansible is concerned with playbooks and inventories. And not only is it concerned with these two different file types, they're optional. There's a lot of flexibility. You don't have to write them in a specific way. You could write them as INI configurations, as YAML files. You don't even have to use them really, because you could just run Ansible commands and manually pass in the target hosts you want to target and the commands that you want to run. So I would say Ansible's flexibility is what gives it the most complexity. But beyond that, just like Terraform, there's a very simple flow to how you actually utilize the tool, right? You're just running essentially a single command over and over and over again and just passing in different arguments. I am looking for the share screen. Let's share this. Okay. So, right, yesterday you all talked about inventory files. Who can tell me what an inventory file is?
Um, all right, I'll try. The the inventory file, I guess it talks to and it tries to connect to like a web server that you're creating or a database. And then I don't know what it does after that, but it can provide like IPs and sets up configurations maybe. I don't.
In a sense,
That's the
yeah.
best I got.
That's good enough. That's a good enough place to start because it's not wrong, right? Um, you've got the idea, and as you feel more comfortable with it, you'll be able to feel more confident in how you articulate it, and it'll be something that you can talk about when you're going through your job interviews and try and impress employers, right? So that is really what it is. You're configuring servers that you're trying to connect to. And at that level, conceptually, it is simple. The complexity comes in the flexibility of how you write these files, right? So far, we have examples of these written in YAML, and that might actually be okay. I was about to say that might be the only format we've shown, but it looks like we're also showing a JSON format here. Yeah, yeah. But once you're comfortable with that concept, you can see that one of the benefits of having these multiple inventory files is you could have pre-configured groups or targets of things to hit. I actually wanted to show you all this example. This is from one of my coworkers. It's his home lab. So it's not from work. It's what he does. It's one of his hobbies. He's got an Ansible directory in his home lab where he's got inventories and playbooks. And if you look at his inventories, it'll reference different VMs that he's made for his friends, for example. He has applications like Docker or cloud hosts running on these various VMs, and he's got everything organized in a way that makes sense to him, right? So we're teaching you, really kind of teaching you one way of writing inventory files in Ansible, but you actually have a lot of flexibility and you shouldn't feel restricted to the examples that we're giving, right? Because this is very different from the examples that we've shown. For starters, it's using a YAML format, right? And a lot of the inventories that we've included in our repository are using the INI configuration. So I know a common concern is like best practice. There is no, I don't think there's a singular best practice, especially for tools like these. Maybe maybe there are like more general best practices, like how do you make something not confusing, right? If you're going to keep something in a kind of modular format, then make it make sense. Don't have like five applications configured in one inventory file or a playbook or something, and then have like lone, I don't know. If you could explain it and have a justification for it, you're you're pretty much good to go. Um, aside from that, yeah, like I said, there are multiple ways to go about doing the same thing, reaching the same end result. And whoever determines what's standard practice, that's really going to be contextual. That's going to depend on where you land with your job search and what practices your employer um, likes to maintain as the standard. Okay, so I was looking for an example from here just to show visually how with the INI format, we're using this bracket notation to specify groups, like Lamar mentioned. And within these groups, we have our different servers, and we could pass in environment variables to these groups. And you also notice in this example, we have a separate group that's specifically a group of environment variables. And I don't think that's intuitive. So you shouldn't you shouldn't feel bad about looking at a file like this and being confused because it is pretty confusing. That's why If you do opt to learn a different format like YAML, I think YAML is a lot more sensible. You have a much cleaner organization of your different components of your configuration, your app, and it's just easier to follow. It's more intuitive. It's easier to read. If we look at some of the playbooks we have today, for example, we're able to specify names for the tasks that we want to run, right? And at the very top, we specify variables. And within these individual tasks, you can specify things like essentially the kind of arguments that you would pass into the command if you're running it yourself from the command line. So true, false values like ignoring errors, um, running Linux commands to do whatever you need. In this case, this is checking if the web server is already installed. And from here, it will install the web server and we're passing in a name for the apt command. And then we're specifying a state. And then we're specifying that we want this to run when this value does not equal 0. Yeah. And the more I look at this, the more I want to like reiterate how unintuitive it really is, especially if you're new to it, right? I think I've said it before, but a big part of being an engineer is reading documentation, right? Like that's just the expectation. That's why there's terms like rubber duck, where it's common practice to just have to talk through your code out loud to make sense of it or to give additional context or to inspire a solution. It's just a part of
The
it's
debug, debugging tactic.
exactly exactly. And like
Julius, on the playbook, usually we put the version that we use because I guess big companies use this for like, okay, you have a new person working a team and you need to run something, so we don't have conflicts
mhm.
with versions of whatever they are using, right? Is
Yeah,
that thing?
yeah,
Okay.
that's definitely a thing. A lot of times if you're working with um, different tools owned by different teams. They may have been built at different times, so they're using different versions of dependencies, right? Like one might be using Python 3.7, others using 3.9. You can specify the versions of the tools and applications that you're running inside of these playbooks. You could specify anything that you need to ensure that the task won't fail and to make it modular, right? So that you could use it in one instance and reuse it in another instance. You can make that version number like an environment variable that you pass in or that it grabs from somewhere else. For example, if we have imagine like two different applications, right? One requires version 3.7 of Python, one requires 3.9. You could have an environment variable in the repository or the root directory of the VM that it's on and have Ansible grab that value from there. So maybe that's another thing that makes Terraform and Ansible a little intimidating. There's actually, on one hand, you are limited in the kind of like language and syntax you're using, right? You have to follow certain rules. You're restricted to really just writing, I guess, configurations or sets of steps. But there's a lot of creativity actually in how you put these things together. And when there's creativity, there's subjectivity, and when you're new to something, I think it's human nature to want to know what's the right way to do it. Just try to just try to reconcile that concern by just powering through, right? Like your goal here is to learn. So practice makes perfect. The more that you run through the exercises and repeat these, the more comfortable you'll become. That's just really all it is at the end of the day. Very good point, Haisa, about the versions. Thank you for that. And
My internship at the company that I was when I finished my boot camp as a software engineer, was a mess because of version of stuff. And they use a Docker. I didn't even know what Docker is. I learned here, kinda, like in a shallow way, what is Docker, because we didn't get into like Docker yet. But they try to put it on my computer, some stuff like downloading some stuff. It was a mess, like, and all the code was like old code with new code and was so stressful. And I'm looking at Ansible and Terraform. I'm like, okay, maybe this would help.
that definitely good. And that, like that's where you could like deliver a lot of value, right? If you see something and you can come up with a solution, there really is a lot of value to that. Yeah, I think a lot of engineering roles have the kind of culture where you have autonomy and you have the ability to, actually like inspire change. If there's a process that you see as not right, then do something about it. Of course, it's going to be harder at some places than others. Changing culture is always an uphill battle. But,
Definitely.
mhm. But when it comes to like a skill set that's very like knowledge independent and with something that's kind of very objective, right? Because if you could make something work, you could show that it works. That's one of the cool things about programming. Like there's value in that. It's like so much more concrete than being an artist, for example, and having to persuade people of the value of your work because that's entirely subjective. Programming, you have a logic you can follow and use to your advantage. Okay, what else are we doing here? Let's actually demo some of this. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of rambling. Um, what can we do? We can spin up some EC2s. So let's go ahead and oh right, my Windows crashed. Gotta get set up again. I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that my EC2s are up. So what was that folder I was using the other? Okay. Plan. Okay. Um, I have multiple AWS profiles, so I have to switch to this one. And it is being slow, so let's open this up. Now let's write another Terraform plan. Cool. So I've got my infrastructure up. What it is, it's the same as what you all saw on Monday. I'm setting up two EC2s. If we want to like just run through it real quick, similar to Julio setup, we have a VPC with subnets because we want to be able to access this, well, eventually publicly, but for now through SSH. And you have the internet gateway, things like that, route table, associations, security group for specifying what we can and cannot do. In this case, we're allowing SSH with this block that utilizes port 22, and then we create our instances. Okay, and I also have these outputs that will spit out the IP addresses of these instances. So even though I don't have any changes to make, I'm gonna run apply so I could get those IP addresses, those outputs, and auto approve is passed in like this. Cool. Now that I've got that, I also made a shell script, Ansible quick start. Let's see if this works. Might help if I pass it into the right command. Okay, so path to my SSH private key. That's going to be users, my user, CP class students at PM. Yep, that's what that shows there. Enter my username. It's going to be EC2 user. That's the first IP address. I wrote this script to basically take these values and set up Ansible on a control node. Why?
Julio, when you stop recording, can you show your script for us? Can you share with us how you
Yeah,
do?
sure. I mean, I can share it now too. Let me run this again because I forgot the .ssh in my path. So users jdcb.ssh class students, and there's no dash there. .pem ec2-user. Let's grab this again. Let's grab that again. Cool. All right, so this is copying over my SSH key to the control node because again, our control node in Ansible, that's what we use to go into the target nodes. And so it's going to need that SSH key to SSH into these other nodes. This next part is asking me for approval. I'm going to say yes. And it looks like it's complaining about something. So let's see. It created an inventory file, so at least that works. Let's go back up and grab my SSH command. So now I'm going to go into my control node. Oh, I have to go to my SSH directory first because that's where I have my key, right? So I run my command, I can SSH. Let's see what succeeded. It created the inventory file like I wanted, but I think it might not have created the SSH key. So let's do an ls. Oh, it did. I don't know why it complained, but it looks like it's good to go. So let's run an Ansible command. All right. Okay, we actually have to reinstall Ansible, I think, because I created a fresh, yep, I've created a fresh instance. And this is the Amazon 2023 image. And I know that we ran into this on Monday where the README was using one package manager, but we had to use another one. So I'm just going to go back to that lesson and I'm going to look for commands I'm supposed to run. And that's sudo yum. Sudo yum update, sudo yum install. Okay. Now, once this is installed, we'll be able to run our Ansible commands. Let's go look at the shell script this really simple shell script. Bash syntax or shell syntax is just really funky, especially with like this backwards if or ending an if block. But what this is doing, this first part, is it's asking for the arguments we want to pass in, right? And so if we don't pass them in, it's going to prompt us at the terminal, like you saw in this terminal here. It's then going to check if the key exists. It's going to run scp and ssh commands to, one, create the ssh directory on our control node. And then it's going to copy the SSH key locally onto the control node in this file path. So locally, I think I was using users JDCB. On the nodes, I have them inside of a home directory and this is supposed to be EC2 user. So if you remember when I typed in the username, it was EC2 user. And then it will create an inventory file using echo and redirect. If you all haven't been practicing Linux commands, which we haven't covered since the first module, redirect is basically the symbol here. It could point both ways, so whichever like less than greater sign you use is the destination. And you can take something that you would output inside of a terminal using echo and store it into that file. So that's how we created our inventory.ini. Inventory.ini.
Julius, if you use two carets or two greater thans, it's a append, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes. Good point, Lamar. If you don't if you don't know that and you are always using the single caret, you're going to be overwriting your content. So if, like Lamar said, you use your double caret, it will add to that file. Okay. So now that's it. That's what we want, right? We just want that inventory file so that we can run an Ansible command. We could point to that inventory file and we can pass in a command because we don't have any playbooks, right? So -m is module, and I'm just going to use a very simple ping module. We're just going to ping this host. And it didn't like that. Let's see. Let's make sure. Oh, can anyone tell me what I did wrong? I thought I knew what I did wrong, and then I realized I don't think that's it. Let's see. Let's read that error message. Some actions do not make sense in ad hoc. Okay, so what is it trying to tell me? It does not like -m is for module. Shoot, if my Windows didn't crash, I would still have this command. I can't do a history grep because that was on the last EC2. Okay, so I need to just look this up. Ansible and ping. Does it? Oh, maybe it wants. Is that what it wants? Nope. If I do a dash all without specifying the inventory file. Okay, so it still doesn't like that. That's weird because This is, oh, let me see. Let's check the inventory file. This should be the right path. Just to double check. Oh, SH. Yep, that looks correct. Okay, I mean, I just pulled this website up. It's saying this would work, so I'm not sure why it's not working. So let me try ChatGPT. Oh, is that what I was doing? I was adding an, yeah, okay, so we don't want a dash on the all. And now it works. Okay, so this is a very, very, very simple inventory file, right? It just lists our one target node. We're not running a playbook yet. We're simply running a command, a module to be specific, on everything inside of this inventory file. And so that is the ping command. It pinged, it was successful. That means our SSH key and our setup is good to go. So let's actually add some complexity to this and let's write a playbook. So let's get out of here. Let's go back to day 3. Okay. So in this example, we're setting some variables. We're setting the web server package nginx, and we're setting some required packages. Will this work in our current use case? It might not, because something to keep in mind is the servers that you target may be utilizing different operating systems, right? So that's why, like how you mentioned earlier, having specifications for like version control, for what actual package managers to use, all of that is important. Let's try this nonetheless. Let's go ahead and make a directory called Playbooks. I'm going to Playbooks. I'm gonna create a file. I don't know, playbook.yaml. Gonna insert this, and we're gonna see if this first task succeeds. So let's go back to our directory, because when we run an Ansible command and we pass in the inventory file using -i, we want, this is a path, basically, this is a relative path. So in this directory I'm in right now, this is where inventory.ini is. I just pass it in by itself because it assumes that we are calling it from our present directory. So with that, let's remove -m ping, and let's add our playbook. So that will just be playbooks, playbook.yaml. And of course, I didn't remember that correctly, so I'm probably missing a flag for playbooks. Let's, I guess, try that. Why there's not like a, that looks like it's setting a base directory. It's not what I want. Let's see. Oh, derp. Okay, here's another quirk about Ansible. When you run the initial command, there's Ansible, and then there's Ansible Playbook. So Ansible Playbook, and I think it might not accept all. Let's see. Yep, all shouldn't be there. Okay, a playbook must be a list of plays, got a class. Okay, it doesn't like that very first block, so let's go back into that playbook. Let's see. Oh, maybe this is just a really bad example. Yeah, so let's try something else. Let's do what we did earlier, which is ping the target, except we'll do this through a playbook. So actually, let's just shrink that down, shrink that down. We're going to, whoops, not cat, I'm going to vim. We're going to edit, delete all this. And let's do just like we see here. I'm going to give it a name. We're going to specify which hosts. In this case, all. We only have one in the inventory file, but this will target all of those one inventories. And then we specify a name, ping test, and I guess we just write ping at the end. That looks really weird to me, but let's write, let's quit, and let's try it. Okay, cool. So it looks like it worked, which again confirms what we saw with our manual ping command, which is that our SSH key works. We can talk to this other host essentially, and everything is good to go. So what else can we do? Let's see if
Can you explain the command and what it's really doing?
sure. Which command? Like the whole command
Yeah,
here?
so Ansible playbook, is that running the playbook and then you're including inventory because you want to connect to the other nodes that are in the inventory file?
Exactly. Exactly. When we saw earlier that I tried it with just Ansible, it failed. And that's because that's just how Ansible is designed. It's got two CLI commands. Ansible by itself is for running a command that you pass in this case, ping. And Ansible playbook is what you pass the playbook into.
Okay.
And we notice like there's slightly different outputs, right? With the playbook, we're seeing this format because it's designed to give you visibility over a range of your targets, right? Generally, it's more verbose in this manner because when you're running playbooks and you're running inventories, you will probably be working with a lot of different targets. And if you're not, this is here to let you know out of that list how many succeeded, how many failed, etc. I just want to try one thing. I want to try adding this. I'm just curious. Okay. That might be a default value. -D is diff, and I think it's by default enabled. It just shows the difference between the previous state and the end state. In this case, we're not actually changing anything, so that's why it looks the same both ways. Okay, so now we can try Let's actually try something else. I don't want to try this. Let's do some package management because that's really what you need to know, right? So for the assessment, what you're going to be using Ansible for is to set up dependencies on a resource that you've provisioned. So let's see if this works. So what this is going to do is install the latest version of Apache. It's going to use the yum command, which is what we want because we are on AWS. Let's just go ahead and try it. I'm going to go back to my inventory, my playbook, sorry. And let's go ahead and add these lines. So now I'm creating a new task. Again, these code blocks are called tasks. And I'm going to call this Apache install. I'm going to do it on all of my hosts.
Do we always need I don't know, this vars? Is that do we need that before tasks?
No, we didn't have it here, right? The vars.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this very first example is just showing that you could utilize default variables at the top. No, I don't know why it failed though. So it might be this, or actually, I think it's where it lines up. So let's try creating a variable from one of these. But let's finish typing this out first. So tasks. Now this subtask has this name. Install Apache. Just some minor trivia. I think on an AWS 2023 Linux distribution, it's just named HTTPD for HTTP daemon. And on an Ubuntu, whoa, what happened there? It's called Apache, I think. What am I doing? I don't know how that all got messed up. Probably because it's Vim. And I can't rely on the command arrows, apparently. So let's clean this up. Let's get rid of this. Or we want to add, no, we want to delete that. Hard to resist the temptation to hold command on everything. Okay, yum, we give it a name, HTTPD. So it's going to install the HTTPD package, which on AWS 2023 is Apache, which I still can't spell. Okay, and we want the latest state. Okay, and then we want to start Apache. So let's create another subtask. Start Apache. And this time we're going to run a shell command for the shell module, however you want to say that. And this is essentially just like entering a line in your shell, right? So let's quit. Let's run it again. And we got one failed task. So what happened? This command needs to be run under the root user. Okay, so let's do something about that. I do not remember off the top of my head how to do that. So Ansible playbook sign in as user. Yes, Ansible become. Yes, because when you're running the command manually, you could pass in the -- become to become root user. It looks like I should be able to add that here. So below hosts, I'm going to say Ansible become yes. The method we want to specify is going to be super user. And we want to be root. I don't know if we're going to need to provide a password. Let's hope we don't. And let's write, let's quit. And let's try that again. Not a valid attribute for a play. So I wonder if, oh, I probably should have been reading the answer and not the question. Okay. So it's not Ansible become, it's become. And this still is become method. Does it matter if they're in a separate order? I don't know. We'll find out. So let's run that. It's thinking, so it's probably a good sign. Womp womp. All right, so we have a timeout waiting for privilege escalation prompt. Okay, it's waiting for a prompt. So it's trying to prompt for a password, and because we're running this through Ansible, there's no way for us to manually put in a password. So let's see, maybe if we I think some of these guys aren't using the become method. So let me just remove this. Though I do think it'll probably still come up. So it worked. So cool. We were able to successfully install Apache. We started Apache. Let's open up our other terminal. Let's SSH onto that node to confirm. So grab this. Right. Gotta go to my SSH directory. And let's see. System CTL, is that it? No. For I want to be able to check the running services. Reach running services. That's not what I want. Okay, taking too long, so let's rely on our handy dandy chat GPT. AWS 3 image. They'll understand what I mean. Cool. Okay. I mean, I don't know if that's right, but cool. So let's see. All right, we see our HTTPD service is running. It's Apache HTTP, and that just confirms that our playbook ran successfully. Okay, what else? More or less, like I said earlier, a lot of engineering is being able to wade through documentation. So don't feel bad if you have to reference commands because you can't memorize them all, right? It's a lot to memorize when you're starting to work with so many different applications in different contexts, with different tools, with different arguments. It's just something that will come naturally over time. So try not too hard to force it. Okay. So this continues to add some examples like removing Apache. It's more or less going to be the same beat, right? We're going to add to the playbook as we expand on it, and it's a lot of trial and error. It really is. You're going to be running the playbooks over and over to make sure to reach a point where they work. And until then, you just power through all the troubleshooting. Okay, so this second lesson is talking about handlers. And okay, it's creating an exercise. Here's where we're able to add some variables, and we're specifying multiple tasks, and then we're creating handlers. So handlers are a set of tasks that are executed when notified by other tasks. And in this case, we saw that we had a handler for restarting PostgreSQL. Where is that being used? Okay, so it's triggered by this previous step. So these tasks run in sequence, and this knows to notify a command inside of our handler. So like if we were writing this in like JavaScript or Python, it's essentially a higher order function, right? We're calling a function from another function. And in this case, we're running this command, PostgreSQL restarted. We're setting it to a restart state. And that is about it. I could demo it. I feel like we've been here for a while. I want to give you all time to work on your challenges. So I might just cut it off here. I could demo this at the end of the night during stand down if nobody else has anything. And let's just real quick take a peek at what today's assignment is. Okay, you're installing Apache on the web servers. You're basically going to be following the example inside of the README to set up an EC2 that you can install Apache on using Ansible. So you've all had to install dependencies manually. You've already done that with the launch template in assessment 1. It's really the exact same thing. Now we're just doing it through an Ansible playbook configuration. So that's challenge. Let me stop sharing. I'll open up breakout rooms and I'll see you all at 9.